People who have conducted job interviews, what's something someone said did that made you instantly decide not to hire them? Candidate kept boasting about how many languages he speaks, even though it was not a requirement for the position. Finally asked him in which foreign language he was most fluent, and he replied, Spanish. Followed up with a simple question asked in Spanish. He did not speak Spanish. Story 2. Guy had to do a presentation, but his laptop battery was dead, so he asked if he could plug it in. One of the panel members had to go under the boardroom table to do that, and the candidate says, well, look at that. I've only been here 5 minutes and already got a woman on her knees. It couldn't actually get worse, of course, but it was extraordinary how bad this experience was. It was for a public sector position, UK, in health, and a considerable part of the role was procurement and contract management. Candidates were told how to prepare and what the assessment criteria would be. Part of this was confidentiality, data, and record security. When the guy started his laptop, we had to wait while he shut down Discord, Steam, and a host of gaming-related apps that just kept booting. As he started his presentation, in the background, the startup music for code or something blasts out of his speaker, so he cancels that and carries on like it's perfectly normal. His desktop was also littered with invoices and quotes that clearly showed company and individual identities. He finished his presentation. No one on the panel asked a single question, and we said thanks. On his way out, he turned and said, I think I ducked that up, didn't I? No, champ, you were golden. Story 3. Back when I was in corporate, a candidate for a middle management role walked into our conference room, and before a handshake or an intro, asked if I was there to take notes for the boys' meeting. Suffice it to say, the interview didn't get much better from there. Story 4. I wasn't the one conducting, but I had a job interview for a driving position. Well, in the parking lot before the job interview, I accidentally rear-ended the manager's car. Safe to say I didn't get the job. Story 5 told about how he stole goods from a store they worked at, put them in his buddy's car, called the cops so his buddy would get arrested, then slept with his buddy's girlfriend while the buddy was in jail. All this in response to the question, tell us about a time when you had an ethical dilemma. What did you do, and what was the outcome? Apparently, his buddies was cheating him on their shared substances business, and so he told us what he did when his best friend wasn't splitting the profits 50-50. Story 6. When asked about how he had handled issues with managers in the past, he started by describing the age, ethnicity, and weight of his manager. Beyond irrelevant. That's going to be a no. Story 7. I worked at a big box retailer and got called up to the service counter to deal with a customer who was upset. This was only a couple minutes before I was scheduled to conduct an interview with a potential new hire. I get up there and this woman is berating the employee behind the counter, referring to her as this Karen, etc. I ask her to lower her voice and please stop being disrespectful to my employee. She isn't happy, but she does eventually calm down enough to be reasonable, and we resolve the situation at the service desk. I turn to walk away, thinking we're done here, and she goes, anyway, I'm here for my interview. I can't believe that this is actually happening. It seems like awful rom-com movie type crap, but this rude-ass woman actually expected me to proceed with interviewing her. I'm sorry, ma'am. That position is no longer available. Story 8. I was the second doing interviews for a lab position. A current employee with a chemistry degree from a local university did not know one end of the pH scale from the other. She had a BS. Story 9. I left my last job because they said I was the primary suspect in $20,000 going missing at Toys R Us. I didn't mind leaving because they worked me like a slave. Story 10. I interviewed a middle-aged woman who was an abject to my junior project manager who I typically forced to do first-level interviews, while I watched in silence to see how they conducted interviews and how they handled themselves. It was a way for me to teach them without cramping their style, and also for me to see what their style even was in the first place. The woman was a solid 10 years older than my junior PM. As soon as the call started, she started negging on my project manager immediately. Oh, wow, you're still a baby. I wasn't expecting to be interviewed by my own child. That was strike one, and personally, I would have ended the interview right there. However, this was a training exercise for my junior, and they opted to push through it. A few sentences later, the woman made a remark along the lines of, I've forgotten more about project management than you've probably experienced in your career thus far. Again, I was eager to cancel the interview, but my project manager seemed to breeze right through it. Where I intervened immediately was when the woman requested to speak to someone with more seniority about the company so that they could ask me questions personally. My project manager tried to gently say, ma'am, that's what the next phase of the interview process will be. This is the preliminary call to get a feel for your background, your personality, and your familiarity with our tool sets. The woman responded with, honey, listen, I know how to use the tools, and I don't think I need to justify my experience to you. At this point, I entered the call. She immediately tried to greet me with a faux sense of warmness, and I just cut right through the bullcrap. Hello, I'd just like to let you know that we'll be stopping the interview at this point. I've been listening into the call, and not only is your conduct incredibly disrespectful, but your conduct isn't welcome on my team or anywhere within this company. Best of luck in your search. The most satisfying moment was when she started to try and say something, and I just ended the call mid-sentence. I don't have time for that bullcrap, and I'm not going to expose people under my care to that sort of toxic nonsense. Story 11. When asked why they thought they were qualified for the job, they replied that they weren't, but it was okay because the position was not a career goal for them. They only needed it to pay bills while they found something else. It was a teaching position. Story 12. Done a number of interviews at a major financial services firm, was hiring for first-year associates. Cute. Tell me about a time you had to work with people who were different than you or had different skill sets, and how did you work around that? A. Well, my last job had a lot of Asians, and they were pretty hard to understand. I had to stop for a second to make sure I had heard that correctly. Also, on another question, she simply said pass, as if that were an option. Story 13. I had a candidate reveal classified information about their work at their previous employer during an interview. No way were we going to trust them with our stuff. Story 14. I once had someone tell me, well, my goal is to be in charge and run the place. So if I see a leadership opportunity, I take it. If I think management is weak, I'll step in and step up to the plate. It's my turn, you know? I don't like a weak manager, and I'm more than willing to take over if necessary. I didn't need someone who would be gunning for my job, undermining me, and attempting a management coup. I needed someone who was going to focus on the work at hand and do their job as directed. I also had someone once apply for a weekend position, then tell me they couldn't work weekends due to religious reasons. So their solution was to hire them for a weekday position, then transfer a weekday employee to the weekends. And if I didn't do that, it was religious discrimination and she'd sue us, because threatening to sue the hiring manager during the job interview is totally going to get you the position. Story 15. There were several. The company was a defense contractor selling widgets to the US military. The candidate gave me a lecture about the evil American empire and how it was everyone's moral duty to stop it. He bragged about his time at another company and the project he had completed single-handed. The problem was that I had worked at that company at that time and was in charge of that project. I'd never heard of him. Turns out, he was hired a year after I left. He was literally taking credit for something I did. The candidate claimed to have a degree from the University of New Jersey. He even showed me a Xerox copy of his diploma. There is no university. Our state university is Rutgers. He asked if the HR manager's breasts were real, or if she had had some work done. Story 16. In a behavioral interview assessing leadership skills, etc. Kwon, did you enjoy having an intern? Oh, yes. I was able to offload lots of work to him. Not a word about mentoring, collaborating, etc. Story 17. He seemed generally irritated at being interviewed by me. He wanted the man in charge, and I am a woman. In the end, I asked if there was anything else he wanted to tell me or that would be relevant regarding his qualifications. He said, yeah, I'm a man, so people listen to what I have to say. That's how things get done. He did not get hired. Story 18. Work in healthcare analytics. Mid-interview, it was virtual as they were from another region. They shared screen to demonstrate the type of work they were currently doing, which we did not ask for, and she did not ask us if she could share screen. And the screen she showed us had clear patient identifiers, health card numbers, etc. We immediately shut that crap down. Patient privacy and data security are absolutely paramount, and that level of cavalier treatment of sensitive patient information immediately disqualified her from being considered, and we had to submit a report to their institution afterwards. Story 19. I see on your application you attended Central High School. My mother is a teacher there. Oh? Who is your mom? Mrs. Bronco. She teaches mathematics. Oh yeah, I know her. She's a Karen. Story 20. I'm not good enough. I'd like to end the interview. I told them that it was just nerves and everything would be okay, and we can continue and see where the discussion goes, but they were adamant that they were overwhelmed and wanted to end the interview. So we did poor last story 21. Customer service job. Guy said he didn't like dealing with people customers, then proceeded to talk crap about a customer he dealt with at a previous job, story 22. I once interviewed a flat earther who admitted in the interview within the first 10 min that the main reason he wanted to work in aviation was to be closer to airplanes so he could prove they were holograms, since clearly they shouldn't be able to fly since the Earth is flat. To this day, I'm not sure if he was just trying to show someone, hey look, I'm applying for jobs, IDK, why they all say no, or he genuinely believed it. But either way, I let the interview go on for like an hour, and him just rant his little heart out. Ended up going in a different direction. Story 23. We had to send all of our interviews for substances tests prior to the interview. Had a guy show up before his results were in and asked to be interviewed ASAP. So I let it slide, interviewed him for about 30 minutes, and let him know we'd reach out with an offer. He interviewed really well. He knew the process, tools, safety devices, etc. Definitely someone I would have hired for a tech position. Then we get his test results. I had to call the testing company to verify. He tested positive for 5 of the 7 things tested for. I figured it was a mistake or something had gone wrong. When I called the number he left, I was amazed to find that it was a work release program. Turned out the guy was out from 7 to 5 every day. Heavy substances user that had the staff convinced he was clean. I understand that. Unfortunately, I could not offer him the position. Probably would have been great if he was clean. Story 24. Been on the other side. I had the lead interviewer raise his voice to me when he didn't understand what I was conveying. I don't mean he just got louder. He was basically shouting at me. I looked at the other interviewer, and he looked all sheepish, which told me that this is the lead interviewer's personality, and it would be exponentially worse if I actually worked for him. I finished the interview and made a point of letting the company know I was withdrawing my application. I had other options at the time. Years later, I got confirmation from someone who worked there that the guy was toxic and scared away staff all the time. Like the saying goes, when they show you who they are, believe them. Story 25. In our interviews for entry-level construction, we ask a stereotypical ethics question. Basically, if you saw someone on site steal an expensive tool and put it in their car, what would you do? Everyone knows to say something like, I would let a supervisor know, or I would try and stop them. One guy I interviewed said verbatim, I aren't no snitch. I respected the honesty, but also stopped the interview right there. Story 26. Guy walked in with his application redacted. He redacted almost everything except his first name and middle initial. Under work history, he had a note saying, we can talk about this during my interview. Yeah, no. Story 27. His phone rang in the middle of the interview, which, not cool, mute that. But then he answered it and gave me the hang on a sec finger, then said, nothing. How about you? I just left the room and asked the admin to show him out. Story 28. Interviewed a person that had a clearly just opened beer on their desk, like it had beads of moisture on it, just out of the fridge or cooler. Well, I'm not going to make assumptions. Maybe it isn't theirs. Then he took a hit of his vape during the interview. I am very, very reasonable when it comes to interviews because I hate being interviewed and I know some of it is bullcrap. People are human and I don't expect perfection. But no way could I effectively argue for them to the team. Story 29. At the end, I asked if he had any questions for me. He said, yeah, that sign on the front door, is that a rule or more of a guideline? I was confused. I said, push to enter? Probably a rule. That's how doors work. He said, no, the one that says no guns allowed on premises. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm kind of dressed like a cowboy. I hadn't noticed, but then I did. Cowboy boots, a westernism vest. He went on, I have holsters all over. For me, putting on my guns in the morning is like putting on my underwear. Important lesson here is never mention your guns or underwear in a first interview. I thanked him for his time and escorted him out. Story 30. This story was told to me by an HR manager. She was once interviewing candidates for an engineering position. At the time, she was pregnant and nearing her due date. She interviewed one man and had decided he would not be hired. But she ended the interview by asking him if he had anything he would like to add. His response was something like, I never expected to be interviewed by a woman, and I certainly never expected to be interviewed by a pregnant woman. Story 31. Midway through an interview, which had been going quite well, I asked a question about how the candidate would manage competing needs of people in the office they would need to be managing. They launched into a diatribe about how it was their way or the highway, and people tended to learn very quickly to do what they said and not to complain. It was such a left-field comment compared to everything they'd said so far, and absolutely not in line with the culture or the ethos of the organization, which was very apparent on even a cursory search. Really made me wonder if they thought they could just pretend to be the right fit, and what they thought the job would be like in reality. I assume they thought they could manipulate everyone around them. Story 32. Had a woman come in and started going through everything wrong with the coworkers at her previous place of employment. All of them, far as I could tell. As she left, I advised her not to do that on her next interview, and she seemed to get it. Story 33. The interview was fine, but something was off. Answers were overly rehearsed, and there was just an off vibe I was getting. After he left, I was contemplating a second interview versus cutting bait. While I was putting away the paperwork, one of the other staff members came back in from a break. The interviewee bragged to the staff member they were going to get hired and get promoted right away, so the staff member better start kissing up now, red flag 1, and that they hadn't slept for over 36 hours as they were still high on crack, red flags 2 through 10. He did not get a call back. Story 34. Tell me about a time you failed and what did you learn from it? I can't think of a time I failed. Can I tell you about a time my team failed? Did not move the candidate forward because the answers showed a complete lack of humility and self-awareness. Story 35. Brought a guy in for an interview. As soon as he sat down, he pulled a can of tobacco out of his pocket. He placed a dip in his lip and asked me for a spit cup. Story 36. We were hiring for an illustrator at a crafting company. He had a nice portfolio and he could clearly draw, but it was all in his own style. When he was asked if he would be able to shift gears and match other styles, he said, "I won't need to because I am so good at my style." We explained that he would have to draw additional assets to match existing illustration styles pretty regularly, and he just snorted and said, "No, they will have to match my style." He was not hired. Story 37. Not me, but my brother was doing an interview with a young applicant for a warehouse job. The applicant's only work experience on their application was a summer job at McDonald's. My brother's going through the interview questions, and one is, during your previous job experience, did you make any decisions that had a positive effect? Or something along those lines. The applicant answered that one day he was working and the weather forecast was for a snowstorm late morning. He said he told his manager that they should not make the normal amount of food for the lunch rush because of the weather. My brother said he was feeling good about the kid until he looked back at his resume and saw that he only worked for 3 months during the summer. The kid didn't get the job. Story 38. I was interviewing candidates for an entry-level developer job. I remember one guy had to consult his own resume to recall if he had taken Java in school. He failed very basic developer questions like, explain what branching is used for in code, or how can you control looping? He had gone to one of those unaccredited for-profit university systems. He did not get to the next round of interviews. I think I'll always remember him because he worked at the Walmart, and the very next day I happened to be behind him in line at a register while he was getting his break snack with a coworker. He clearly didn't recognize me and was talking to his coworker about how well his interview went, and that he couldn't wait to start working for us. I really felt for the kid. He was on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars for a worthless degree that he got no actual skills or knowledge from. Story 39. Do we have to go on the south side to do orders? If so, can I opt out of those? I am not comfortable about people. Little did he know, the employee that has been with us for 32 of our 38 years from the south side, Chicago, was on the other side of the wall. The second he left, I let her know, and she was dying laughing. She ran outside to wave goodbye to him as he left the parking lot. Story 40. 1. Zoom interview. She was wearing lacy pajamas and the matching silk robe. 2. Many Zoom interviews, unable to connect their camera or sound. Since we work hybrid remote, it isn't a good sign if someone can't work Zoom. 3. Multiple Zoom interviews, didn't have their phone propped somewhere, and instead kept fidgeting with it or holding it. I feel like I'm interviewing the Blair Witch Project. 4. Have had people interview for positions and tell me their least favorite function at their current job is the main function of the position they are interviewing for. I start every interview by telling them about the position and go into detail about the day-to-day job. There is no way they could be confused about what duties they would be responsible for. Story 41. My 2IC and I were interviewing for a summer position, and a guy had a decent interview. He probably would have had an offer. The line supervisor was greeting candidates. After every interview, we asked her if she had any input. This guy, he was staring at my boobs, so I asked him to stop. He didn't. We disqualified him right then. Story 42. I wasn't conducting the interview, but I was sitting in the waiting area when this happened, so I got to watch the whole thing unfold. This guy walks in for his interview, and he's on his phone. Not like wrapping up a call in the parking lot, actively having a full conversation as he walks through the door. The receptionist greets him. He holds up one finger in that "give me a minute" gesture and just keeps talking. She's standing there with the clipboard, trying to be professional, and he's discussing what sounds like weekend plans with someone. Finally, and I mean a solid 3 minutes later, he ends the call. Doesn't apologize, just says, "I'm here for the 2 o'clock. She takes his name, asks him to have a seat, and goes to let the hiring manager know he's arrived. The guy sits down across from me, pulls out his phone again, and I kid you not, he's playing a mobile game with the sound on. Not loud, but audible, in a quiet waiting room. About 5 minutes later, the hiring manager comes out. Professional guy, extends his hand for a handshake. The candidate looks up from his phone, sees the outstretched hand, and says, "I will never forget this. Oh, can you give me like 2 minutes? I'm almost done with this level." The hiring manager just stood there. You could see him processing whether this was actually happening. Then he slowly lowered his hand, said, "Actually, I think we're all set here," turned around and walked back to his office. The candidate finally looked up from his phone, confused, and asked the receptionist, "Wait, was that the interview?" She just smiled and said, Yes it was." He sat there for another minute, looking genuinely baffled before he packed up and left. The receptionist and I made eye contact after he was gone, and we both just started laughing. Some people really do interview themselves right out of a job. Story 43. Smirked and sounded snotty and entitled immediately after greeting me and me asking them to be seated. "Bye, and you thought I was the assistant. But guess what? I would have been your boss." Story 44. Said females repeatedly. and then proceeded to try to recite the criminal code in reference to several questions. And when he was explicitly misinformed on several offenses, he doubled down and attempted to correct both myself and the other interviewer, citing our lack of real experience as the reason for our supposed errors. Story 45. Me. Why do you want to move into a leadership position? Them. The power. I thanked them for the transparency and told them it wasn't a fit right there. It was an internal opening too, so it was a bit of a career pathing ended for them. I did ask a follow-up question about that, and it's strictly related to the ability to hire and fire for any reason, which was widely known to be a committee activity hiring or above their desired management level, discipline, nor how we treated our team, as that would be a horrible place to work. Story 46. To be honest, this only made me want to hire her more, but I was overruled by the other interviewers. Me. What would you consider your greatest weakness? Her. Oh, I eat way too many pickles, me. Girl, same. That's not really what I meant though. Her. I don't work out as much as I should. The job was for a data management visualization role. Story 47. I was looking to add to my team. One candidate told me he'd have my job within a year because he'd ask my boss to play golf and push me out. Real team player there. He didn't get the job. Story 48. I called someone for a scheduled initial phone interview. I woke him up at 2 p.m., asked him to tell me a bit about himself and why he was interested in this job. Response was, I don't know. What do you want to hear? Thanked him for applying and hung up. Story 49. I was the admin assistant. The girl came in for the interview. She was a half hour early. I said she could wait in the lobby. She was so insistent that her interview time was now. It was not. I double-checked the schedule and the emails my invite I had sent out to her. I told her, hey, better early than late. I told my boss afterwards because she had been so rude to me and blamed me for being early. He didn't hire her. Story 50. Me being at just the right age to not know teenage speaking and had to interview an 18-year-old kid. Interview was a train wreck from the start, but he said, yet, at one point. Curiosity got the best of me, and I was like, yeet? This dude picked up my pen and threw it across the room, then looked me dead in the eyes and said, yeet. I kind of respected him for that, but also, hell no. Story 51. So I run a nonprofit and our interviews are with people who wanted to do community service at the rescue, so not an employment interview. But I've had several people ask me to commit forgery and lie about their hours in exchange for money. That's a felony. Glad they have learned nothing from being on probation. Story 52. I was a part of an entry-level firefighter process a few years ago for my department. This was for folks who would undergo a 20-plus week training before getting placed on an engine to start their first year. Our department is also adjacent to multiple ski resorts, one of which is serviced by one of our stations. Had a young man, maybe 19, sit down for his interview. We asked about his interest in our department, and he answered that he thought it was so cool that we are just so close to skiing and could hit the slopes right after work. We asked why he was interested in being a firefighter and again talked about his stoke for having such great access to skiing and having 4 days off for skiing. We asked a few more questions and then spent the remainder of his time talking about our favorite places and trails to ski. He was not hired. Story 53. So, are any of the women who work here hot? On a different note, a long while back I was in orientation for a warehouse job for FedEx, and it was just me and one other guy watching a harassment video. The video ends, we start filling out the stupid paper, and he turns to me and goes, hey, what are the right answers? I didn't watch the video. The questions were yes, no, and true, false. Should you touch Mary after she told you no? Story 54. This was pre-COVID. Phone interview. Junior role at a public company. First call, no answer. Next call 2 minutes later, he picks up and it was very obvious my call woke him up. That was pretty much it. But the icing was his answer for weaknesses. He said punctuality. Story 55. This wasn't a great applicant to begin with. Nail in the coffin was at the end. She asked me to not contact her current manager for a reference with the reason that the manager was new to her role and wouldn't be able to properly speak to this applicant's practice of performance. Thing is that her current manager was a friend of mine, who I knew had been in that role for several years, so it was clear she knew she'd get a terrible reference and just made up a weird lie about it. Story 56. I had someone tell me that he looked up my Facebook, tell me he knows my father, and then ask me about mutual friends. The Facebook lookup isn't abnormal, but making it a series of questions in the interview absolutely is. It felt so invasive and icky. I locked my Facebook down after that and did not hire the guy. I couldn't even tell you if he was qualified for the job. Every time I asked him about his experience, he tried to steer the conversation back to people we knew in common. Story 57. Got asked a pretty standard question. Responded aggressively telling us it was the wrong question. We tried to give him some grace and he doubled down on the aggression just short of calling us idiots. Yeah, dude, that's gonna be a no for me. If you don't take the lifeline, you're telling me this isn't a one-off and I'm just going to have to deal with you as you are every day. Instead, I could just not do that. Story 58. I have a name that can be shortened. I do not like the shortened version, so I always introduce myself by my full name and correct people if they decide to shorten it. This man decided to use the shortened version of my name throughout the interview. I corrected him multiple times, and other people in the room noticed I was getting more and more angry each time. Story 59. Showed up at 11:40 when the scheduled time was 10:30, confirmed via phone call and text, was wearing jeans and an untucked button-down tee. When I told him he was late, he said, "I thought it was at 11:30, to which I replied, "So you'd still be late?" and asked him to leave. Then he threw a fit for me, not giving him a chance. The guy who showed up on time and was well-dressed became a personal friend of mine and replaced me when I left my position there, and is still running that place 8 years later to great success. Story 60. He told me straight up that he only wanted this job as a way to get into the studio so that he could have my job. I did not hire him as my assistant, not because I was threatened, but because there's no point in hiring an assistant whose only goal is to leave that role as soon as possible. At least pretend you want to do the actual job I'm hiring you for. Story 61. Someone was watching their nephew due to a family thing, and her house wasn't equipped for kids, so please be patient. Toddler was all over the place, and she was doing her best to manage the situation. She knocked it out of the park, keeping on task and speaking nicely to him. She wasn't the most qualified, but the most human, and I hired her, and don't regret it. She has paid back that choice many times, proving her demeanor was exactly as she demonstrated. Sorry, not a negative story, but a positive story. We talk about her interview from hell all the time and laugh. Story 62. I work in the 3D business. We work with some of our country's largest firms, mainly focusing on technical 3D as well as some major international brands. We are a highly sought-after employer. We had a kid walls in from school showing his portfolio. It was basically 100% anime fox girls with extreme proportions, sitting in challenging positions on cyber motorcycles. He basically never held eye contact with any of the female staff. 2 of 3 interviewers were female. He started one piece with the nude model, albeit in clay mode, so at least not shaded, thank God, with her legs spread to make space for the motorcycle, and then added in piece by piece, nodded along to his own showreel music, and followed along in the beat drop. It was just kind of distasteful for what we do. There are for sure studios out there that will appreciate the aimed fox ladies, but we mainly do furniture and cars and such, so yeah, not sure WTF he was thinking. Story 63. Used to take new hire cab drivers out to show them the ropes and assess them. Young guy 21 or 22 was brought in by his mother, which was odd, but maybe not that odd. Seemed okay at first, but as I'm talking to him, I notice he's not actually answering any questions you ask him. He responds, says a few things somewhat related, so it kind of sounds like he's talking about what you're asking about, but it's incomplete and indirect. I kept imagining him trying to work through a sensitive situation where communication is key. When I got back, I wrote about it on his review sheet and gave it to the shift lead. A few days later, he told me they didn't hire him. Background check came back. Kid had just spent 6 months in hospital for schizophrenia and had some anger issues on his rap sheet. Story 64. These are all real things people have said to me while interviewing them for professional staff positions in high-end night music clubs. My hobby is day drinking. I start drinking when I wake up and don't stop till I pass out. Yeah, the girls are hot. That's really why I want the job. The duck with bad careens. Well, I was fired for smoking, but it was wrongful termination. It was crack, not meth. I'm here for the free liquor. How many free drinks do I get on shift? So on and so forth. Now look, we are a lenient employer. I don't ask about criminal history. You don't even necessarily need experience. I want people that are reliable, personable, and willing to take direction. But you can't tell me you're here to harass my staff and drink away my inventory. We are not having a party. We are producing a party for others. And though we may enjoy it, we are here to work. Story 65. I've been working in recruitment HR for 10-ish years, so I have a lot. Recently, had a 23-year-old hit his vape while on a third-round interview with the firm's partners. I was the organizer, and I unfortunately thought I saw it unfold in real time, but shrugged it off because no one would do that, right? Nope. Partners called immediately after. I was pissed. The job was amazing too, working at a small investment firm. I asked him why. He said he got nervous and forgot what he was doing. He sounded really upset too, that he hits it too much. I laughed. I have to, and just said, listen, keep the vape outdoors next time. Switch to Zyn, an older one. Candidate was interviewing with client, and client hears, welcome to Arby's, how can I help you? And he politely asks client to hold and orders the food. This was in the very beginning of my career. Story 66. I had someone whose answer to every question was more or less, I'd come to you every day and ask what to do. No, I'm not a babysitter. I need someone who can do a job. Story 67. Me. So why are you interested in being our data analyst? Her. My mom worked for the government and said that I want a government job. Me. Do you have any experience with relational databases? Her. I don't know, maybe. Like I said, it's a government job. I need benefits. We still went through with the interview because we had to. She scored a 4 out of 27 on the questions. Me, after the interview to the 8 HR person on the panel, how the hell did she make the cert list? HR rep shrugs. It especially sucks in government hiring since we may have a ton of applicants for a specific position, but HR will only send us 5 or so names to interview. So dozens don't even get a shot because this person slipped through. Story 68. Being late is a common one. With good reason is one thing, but no reason at all is pretty common and is an instant deal breaker for me. Favorite is a younger woman I interviewed for an entry-level customer service role. Substances testing was part of the onboarding process at the company at the time, and she agreed to take part after we narrowed down the selection. When the results came back, it would have been a shorter list of what she didn't have in her system. When I called her, she wasn't at all surprised, but just thought we wouldn't actually do the testing and felt too embarrassed to cancel the appointment. Story 69. This is not an outright reason to not hire someone, but people talking about their involvement in their church. I've done tons of interviews where people use their experience being involved and having faith as a selling point. The only ones that were worth hiring were the ones that had actual relatable experience. Talking about being a deacon or running a fellowship group doesn't do a lot, but talking about organizing groups of people for annual events and organizing helping with the church's finances, budgeting, paying bills, fundraising, and developing public speaking skills in front of large groups is more applicable. Story 70. One of my favorite stories. Me. Do you work well with others? Well, I don't know. I don't really like it. Like, right now I work with a team and like 2 of them are crippled, so I don't really enjoy it. Well, I guess one guy is crippled, the other is just a little handicapped. At one point, he said something insane, and I put my head in my hands so he couldn't see me laugh. Unprofessional on my part. Him. Oh, are you tired? Me. No, I'm all right. Him. Well, you look really tired. I wasn't BTW. I just don't wear makeup to work. He also showed up to the interview with a 44 Oz orange Slurpee and sucked loudly from the straw throughout the interview. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Story 71. I interviewed a guy years ago. We asked him to tell us about a disagreement he had with someone and how they worked it out. He told us about a roofing job where him and another guy were arguing on the roof. He threw the other guy off the roof, got fired from the job, and arrested. We decided probably not a good idea to hire him. Side note, we had another person answer the question by telling us about how he believes in mermaids and his mom didn't. I hired him on the spot because he sounded awesome to have around. Fast forward a few weeks, and we found him huffing paint. Good times. Story 72. You know, if you feel like your employer's not paying you enough, I think it's totally fine to steal from them. If they don't want you stealing from them, then they ought to pay you more, right? How much money would be enough? I don't know. I guess we'd have to see. Would I report someone else for stealing from the company? Hell no. I'm not a damn narc. Yeah, cool. No, I don't think we'll be doing a second interview. Story 73. I asked her about a time that she saw a project to completion. She told us, my assistant manager was in on the interview with me, about how in high school she wrote a 10-minute play that her classmates then put on with her directing, but that my assistant and I wouldn't understand about because we probably aren't interested in the arts because we were men. In high school, my assistant manager was a band nerd and also painted the picture that hung on our wall. In high school, I was also a band nerd in high school, in addition to being a drama geek. I also wrote a 10-minute play that my classmates then put on. I also happened to be a season ticket holder to 2 different theater companies on our city. Not only did she not get hired, you probably aren't interested in the arts, became a running joke around the office, especially because the person we did hire is an actor, story 74. Candidate looks at watch, asks, how long is this gonna take? I say, I have great news. You can leave now. Fastest interview ever. It really did happen. Story 75. I'm afraid of heights. I felt bad, but we needed Guy to work a commercial contract, and 95% of our work was on the ceiling or on a rooftop. I had to tell him no and why, and he was relieved. Story 76. What's the hardest thing you have ever overcome? Candidate was totally freezing up, seemed to be struggling to come up with a good interview answer. Then just throws his hands up and says, duck it, substances. I will never, ever forget that dude. He got hired and was a total stand-up guy, honest, hardworking, and smart as duck. He asked me about that answer, and I was like, duck it. You nailed the rest of the interview, and you overcame addiction. Story 77. I was the receptionist, not the hiring manager. I told HR I had a funny feeling about the guy she had just interviewed. I couldn't explain it. He just didn't feel right. They hired him. Everyone loved him. Salesman, wife fighting cancer, would give you the shirt off his back. I felt like a heel. Then the police show up and want to talk with HR. The hire was taken out in handcuffs. He had embezzled from his last job. He didn't even have a wife. HR told me if I ever have had one of those feelings after she had seen an applicant to tell her. It never happened again while I was employed there. Story 78. I worked in a restaurant and I had to walk out a problematic dishwasher who gave attitude to servers and would disappear for hours. So we fired him. Fast forward 3 years and I'm at a different restaurant working with another colleague from the previous one. The kitchen manager come back and says, "Do you know this guy? He's applying here and his resume has the same restaurant you were at." I said, "Yep, don't hire him. He'll give you headaches." The manager says, "Did you want to come out and tell him no?" I said, "Sure." I walked out into the dining room, saw the guy. He sees me and turns white as a ghost. I laugh and said, "Hell no," and walked to the back. Kick rocks, Jeremy. What is the weirdest question you've been asked at a job interview? What happened? Story 1. My GF was recently asked on an interview, "What weapon would you want to have in a zombie apocalypse?" She answered lightsaber. They asked why. She said because it doesn't run out of ammo or get dull. They seemed to like that answer, she said. Story 2. What would you do if someone started shouting at you in a meeting? I responded that I'd just leave the meeting. I don't get paid to babysit. If someone wants to act like a child, I'll leave them to it. The interviewer seemed taken aback, while the other guys chuckled. Turns out the guy who asked the question had a habit of raising his voice to people who disagreed with him. I ended up getting the job and found out the guy was just super invested in the product he was developing. Like he had patents on it, books written, etc. So when he's in a meeting and gives an input and someone disagrees with him, he will not let it go until they are on board. Because in almost every case, he is right. He was a great guy and I miss working with him. He never raised his voice with me though. Story 3. During an interview, my insulin pump went off. It does this quite often. My potential boss asked me if I had to wear it all the time. I said yes and explained I was a type 1 diabetic. They then asked me if I could leave my insulin pump in a locket for an 8-hour shift. No, I can't. It got awkward. I didn't get the job. Story 4. Last question in an interview for being a bank teller. If you could be any kind of fruit, what kind of fruit would you be and why? I said a mangosteen. Years later, I asked him about that question. He said he just wanted to know what people would say. He said there were no wrong answers. Story 5. What's your pet peeve? Told him it was people talking on their phones in public with the speaker on. Panel of 6 and 4 were guilty of it. I did not get the job. Story 6. It was a panel interview, about 6-7 people, dept heads, HR, etc., for a 911 dispatch job. This detective, out of the blue, asked me if I had ever abused someone. Really caught me off guard and threw the whole interview off the rails. Story 7. How do you tie your shoes? Opening question. It honestly helped calm me down and made the interview easier to get through. I brought up the D-stock on how to properly tie your shoe and the lesson I learned from that. Story 8. Interviewer. You don't have any kids? Me. No, not yet. Interviewer. You're Mexican, aren't you? Me. You can't ask that during an interview. Dude went bright red and apologized immediately before I burst out laughing. The interview was going well and I already had the job in the bag. At this point, we were more or less just chatting. Story 9. I understand that you are profoundly deaf. Will you be available for a phone interview with the HR? I was overwhelmed by the stupidity of someone who made $80K a year. Story 10. If you were given a black rhinoceros and you couldn't sell it or give it away, what would you do with it? I don't know what that question tells anyone. I said something along the lines of, I think they're endangered, so I wouldn't kill it for meat. I would lend it to a zoo that could house it for me and take care of it. In return, they can use it for breeding and research. They liked the answer. Story 11. I got hired and quit this same day. I turned 19 and was looking for something full-time. I got a call for an interview at some promotion business. I get called into a room where my new boss was sitting. He was very friendly and nice, but it all became very weird very quickly. He asked me normal interview questions, like, what made you want to apply? Do you have experience in promotion work? Where do you see yourself in this company? Eventually, he trails off to make small talk, which would be normal if it wasn't weird. He asked, how old are you? Oh, wow, you're young. I think you'll have an easy time here. You're very beautiful. Very beautiful. You know, as soon as you walked in here, I just felt something. You have such a strong energy. I don't know if it's that smile or your charisma. I was very shy. I did not have a bubbly personality at all. He sent me out on the field alongside another girl to test the waters, I suppose. We stood in front of a well-known bar where our mentor told us that the promotion at his stand was to sell backpacks for kids in need of school supplies. After he explained that, he called my boss and said I was a good fit. Immediately after that, my boss called and was like, I knew you had it in you. I don't know what it is about you and my name, but you just have something amazing going on. I already decided not to go with the other girl I was with because it's your name. I want to see up here with mine. I told him I was late for class and sped back to campus where I told my teacher why I was late and what had happened. He instructed me to quit immediately. Story 12. Do you like to laugh? Asked by the most stoic woman who worked in that office. I laughed in response and got the job. Apparently, I answered correctly. Story 13. Had an interview with a panel of 3 guys. Each would ask questions. It was a very professional environment and job position. All normal questions thus far. Then, the lead interviewer said, "Okay, I have one last question. Can you kick or throw a ball farther?" I thought odd, but said, "Kick a ball farther." Then the next one chimed in and said, "What kind of alcoholic drink do you prefer? Beer or hard drink?" I said both. The last guy wanted to be part of this and just said dirty junk. I was quite shocked at the question, but played the game with them and only responded with, "Depends on which alcoholic drink I had earlier." They all laughed and said the job was mine. I didn't take the job and ended up at a different company and much more successful end. Story 14. Other than the 20K less, being less than what was originally offered to you, do you have any concerns about the job? I was offered the job and turned it down. They were surprised I didn't take on the opportunity. Story 15. Him. You're not into older women, are you? Me. I guess not. Why do you ask? Him. I came home one day to find my boss ducking my wife. I'm making sure nobody ducks my wife again. I had tears in my eyes trying to hold back the laughter. I got the job though. Story 16. For residency, I was asked why I didn't do a bunch of research projects my intern year. Because I was working 95 hours a week like the rest of the interns? Come on, man. Story 17. Did you take one of my committee members' methodology course? So, back when I took it, he'd occasionally throw chalk at us if we weren't following along. Does he still do that? Turns out, he'd mellowed with age. Story 18. A year ago, I went for a role as a project geo with a junior exploration company. I was interviewed by their new exploration manager who had come from a larger, more successful explorer who had recently had some success in finding a large gold deposit, their senior geo, and their geriatric technical director. The them asked me the usual question. Tell me about yourself and your career. Why am I leaving my current role? Why do you want to work for us? Why did you want to be a geologist? Tell me about a time you made a positive impact in the industry. The usual bullcrap that goes along with applying for a job. He finishes his questions and opens the floor up to the senior geo and the technical director. Senior geo mumbles some basic questions off, nothing of any substance, and passes me off to the dinosaur. This dude starts tearing into my resume and starts asking me questions like, why are you leaving your current role? You've only been there for 12 months. As I elaborated on earlier, my current employer is cutting their exploration budget and isn't actively exploring anymore, instead choosing to focus their resources on optimizing their underground operation. The only option left to me with them is to transition to a production role, and I don't want to do that. A number of your roles have lasted 3 and 6 months. Why is that? Those were contract gigs. The contract lasted 3 or 6 months. Oh, so they didn't renew the contract after that? Why is that? No, the contract length was 3 or 6 months. There was no more work for me after that. I completed the contract and then moved on to another contract. Why didn't you stay around longer? Because the work had finished. They no longer required my services at that particular point in time. Are you prepared to go above and beyond your scope of work? Are you willing to prove yourself within this organization? I understand that the exploration industry doesn't work on a rigid schedule, and that we will need to work abnormal hours on occasion, or work longer hours to get a drill out completed, and that my role may be multifaceted and fluid in nature, depending on what needs doing. I'm sure it all comes out in the wash during periods when we aren't as busy, and we can knock off a few hours early. I am reasonable and realistic, but I'm not going to be exploited. As for proving myself, I'm sure my resume speaks for itself, and more than proves my capabilities. Then, it was turn to ask questions. So I asked the technical director what his issues were with my resume, and he replied with, "It seems you change jobs pretty regularly. It could come across as not having any loyalties to a company." I laughed at this and said, I change jobs based on my mood and how I am being treated. I have stayed at jobs for significant periods of time because they valued me and my contribution. I don't hang around workplaces which don't value me. If you want loyalty, get a dog. Needless to say, I didn't get offered that job, but that's okay. After that interview, I wouldn't have taken it. Story 19. I had a late afternoon interview in a downtown Seattle high-rise. The company contact forgot to mention they locked access to their floors, and they forgot to remind anyone to let me up, and they left for the day. Nobody would answer the company phone. As the clock ticked upward, I managed to bypass building security and ended up wandering around the ESP offices until I found some nice person who badged me back into the elevator to the lobby. I eventually found a super nice maintenance guy who got a helpful building security guy to ring someone at the company who said, "Oh yeah, they're locked," and then got someone else to let me up. I ended up not getting the job because I didn't know the proprietary algorithm the interviewer had invented when he worked on Visio. Story 20. I was once asked about my hobbies, which itself is cool, but when I mentioned that I like dancing, the guy interviewing me laughed and suggested that he always wanted to learn and if I can teach him how to. He was trying to flirt, I guess, but it came off creepy as hell. Story 21, there was a section that they required you to fill out a writing in cursive. I asked them why, and they said they would send it out for handwriting analysis. Nope, out of there pretty quick. Story 22, went to a job interview at Applebee's. After going over my extensive work experience in the service industry, the manager asked, if you were a cereal, which one would you be? Me. I don't know. Cheerios? Him. Why Cheerios? Me. Because I seem like a Cheerio kind of person? Him. Most people say Fruit Loops because they're fun and colorful. Me. I did not get the job. Story 23. Tell me about the lowest point in your life. This was after living through the pandemic, postpartum depression, and the death of over a dozen family, friends, and my dog in the span of 2 years. I kept it light and relevant to my career, so not to trauma dump, but in my mind, I was replying with a very loud, "What is that?" Story 24. I was asked, what is best in life? I answered, to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women. I got the job. Story 25. Mall security guard. There a reason your legs are crossed like a woman? Meanwhile, I had the boss man's muscle standing right on my ass, breathing heavy. The rest of the interview was weird. Just a speech about not beating up people, but they made it seem like that's all it was. Ducking super glad I didn't get that job. Story 26. You mentioned on your background information forms you've pointed a weapon at someone and you've handled explosives. Care to explain that to us in extreme detail? At my interview for King County Sheriff's Department, found out from the HR they didn't fail me for that and actually like my answer to it. Instead, they failed me on the question of, it's almost the end of my shift and I pull over. Someone appearing to be under the influence. It's the chief of police, sheriff of the next county city to you. How do you handle this? And follow up, what if it was your own sheriff? I told them I'd treat them exactly the same way I would for anyone else driving under the influence. Only difference is I'd give my supervisor a courtesy call to tell them what's going on. They were not happy with that. Story 27. I met with 3 company directors before meeting with the CEO for a job transfer to a higher position. I worked at a remote plant and was applying for a promotion to the home office. I didn't know any of the directors. After meeting the CEO, one of the directors asked how the interview went. I said, well, she winked at me and said, I'll do fine. So either I got the job or a hell of a lawsuit. He couldn't stop laughing. I got the job. Story 28. Oh, I get to actually tell this story. I had a job interview for basically a furniture transportation job for a major city school system. The interview is conducted with the hiring manager, assistant hiring manager, and the foreman of the operation. The hiring manager asks what she called fun icebreaker questions, one of which is, if you could listen to one song for the rest of your life, what would it be? At this moment, I'm calmly and quickly trying to filter out all of the most hardcore rap I would pick to give a very interview-safe answer. I end up saying that there's this song called I'm Free on this album called Saint Elsewhere that I would enjoy listening to. She says she never heard the song, and Ducking proceeds to play it on her phone on speaker. It's a fun, non-offensive, upbeat song, and the whole time, I'm glad and mortified that I didn't tell her The Mob by Wayne instead. Didn't get the job anyway, so I probably should have told the truth. Story 29. Interviewing to be a CPS social worker, and they set up a role play. The much older woman played a 5-year-old, and the much younger woman played her mom. The idea was to role play that first interaction when you knock on their door, and they basically just yelled at me for 10 minutes. Got the job though, hated it, and quit around 6 months. Story 30. Would I consider not wearing makeup? As to not offend his Islamic beliefs. It was an interview for a quality inspector position at a company that made glass mason jars. Story 31. Why do you know insert name of childhood best friend's older sibling on Facebook? That was the first question. I had to explain the story, and it turned out they dated. Turns out, we had 35 mutual friends and went to the same high school, grew up in the same area, and she cried, super pregnant at the time, and hugged me and told me I had the job if I wanted it. Story 32. Why are you interested in this job? It seems like a complete 180 from your college degrees. I explained how my bachelor's and master's were literally what the company does. Both degrees are in biomed engineering. Company was a medical device company. No, it still seems like you're doing a complete 180 from your experience, so not sure why you're interested in this job. All right, man. Funny part was, they rejected me for a better candidate and then sent me an email a month later asking if I was still interested since the previous candidate dipped. Story 33. Are you ready to touch a body? I recently applied for a position at a cemetery where groundskeeping was the advertised duty, but it also entailed removing the deceased to the funeral home and, if applicable, cremating them. Story 34. In the middle of an IT job interview, I got a, who do you consider your most inspirational historical figure? I couldn't think of anything else on the spot. So I said Joan of Arc, then listed the details of the Joan of Arc campaign from Age of Empires 2. I got the job. Story 35. I'm a paraplegic. I've been asked in a job interview how could you possibly use a computer? Another time, I was asked, do you really need to use that wheelchair? They were worried about how a wheelchair could negatively impact the office culture or environment. People have no clue how to interact with disabled folks sometimes. Story 36. For the job I have now, there's no dress code, no substances test, and people learn things the hard way here. Didn't quite understand that last one until I split my middle finger open with a hammer and was handed hydrogen peroxide, gauze tape, and a few band-aids. Also cut my palm open with a skill saw. My own dumbass fault trying to do something in a hurry, was told. Well, you got another hand. I do love my job, though. Story 37. So it wasn't a specific question, but when I was at an interview for Hobby Lobby, they gave me a math worksheet to fill out. Like, what the heck is that about? Story 38. My CV details my 3 years of training, all the qualifications I earned, and the years I got them. All the experience I accumulated during my years in the industry, as well as the various levels that I've worked at, including one of the highest levels within that industry. And the interviewer took a glancing look at my CV, as though he wouldn't have had to read it back to front to twice, just to gauge if I was worth interviewing, dropping it on his desk and asking me, so what makes you think you're qualified for this job? I tell you now, I was so dumbfounded by his audacious stupidity, I just picked my CV off his desk, slipped it into my satchel, and walked out. 6 weeks later, I see him getting interviewed for a management position at my new job. So I interrupt the interview, sit next to our interviewer, who is a good personal friend, who didn't even need to look at me to know what I was going to ask. And I bet you might too. I picked up his CV, took a glancing look, dropped it on the table, and asked him, what makes you think you're qualified for this job? The look of defeat in his eyes was bliss. No, he did not have an answer that wasn't already written down. No, we did not hire him because when we called his references, most told us up front that they had massive amounts of customer and staff complaints about him. And yes, I was thoroughly satisfied as the job I ended up taking was better paying, better hours, and I get along with all my coworkers really well. Story 39. I was asked by the general superintendent what I thought of one of his superintendents that kept calling him while he was showing me some of their jobs. I said, he clearly doesn't know what he's doing. He is related to the owner. Or you jump their crap if they make a decision. I knew the job wasn't a good fit for me during the interview with the owner and the HR lady. He tells me the super is his brother. I start laughing and then he chuckles. I said, well, F it, can you take me back to my truck? No hard feeling, thanks for the tour. I never got a call back and they went out of business a year later. Story 40, my favorite swear word. It was an interview with someone I'd been working with for years and he was mostly kidding. Just asked to break up the seriousness. I pretended to take it seriously and answered honestly and got the job. Story 41. Do you drink? Turned out that this place was a work hard, party hard environment, and they wanted people that would fit in. I do drink, I did get the job, but I soon realized that I didn't drink enough to fit in. That place was off the chain. Story 42. The interviewer handed me a sticky note and told me that I had 2 minutes to tell him 10 things that I could use the sticky note for besides writing on it. And so I started racking my brain on practical things I would actually use a sticky note for, such as using the sticky part as makeshift tape, origami, tearing it up and using it as confetti, etc. After the 2 minutes were up, he told me, what you didn't say was you could have balled it up, chewed on it, folded up, and I interrupted him saying origami is basically folding. But at the end, he told me that he asks this question to gauge how people would respond under a time limit. He says that usually people just say the first 10 things that come to their minds really quickly and just do nothing for the rest of the time. But he seemed to like my answer since I actually tried and thought for the entire 2 minutes. And he said that he liked my origami answer in the end. Story 43. Not an interview, but part of a job application process. I was given an ethics test. All questions were on a range of 1 to 10, 1 very unlikely, 10 very likely. Most of the questions were like, would you tell management if you saw someone stealing a company pen? Would you tell your manager if you saw someone steal $10? Stuff like that. 2 similar questions stood out. I had an attitude problem, but not anymore. I had an attendance problem, but not anymore. So a 10 means yes, that is true. But what did a 1 mean? I had those problems, but still do. I never had those problems, but do now. I never had those problems and still don't. To make the whole thing worse, despite it being 1 to 10 answers, and you had to answer honestly, they don't want any answers that were 3-8 and force the test on you again if you answered any 3-8. I withdrew that application after that. Story 44. It was a YN questionnaire with some really weird questions on it. Too much is made of the adult film industry these days. I have never hit someone in anger. I have to admit, there are people I would like to punch. This is for a simple office job, LMAO. I thought these questions were ridiculous. I don't even understand the first one. And being someone who used to box, I had the choice of lying or being honest on the second and maybe the third one. Aha. But I thought, duck it. Ask contextless questions, get contextless answers. Yes, I've punched someone in anger. And yes, there are some despots in the world who deserve a smack. Didn't get the job. Story 45. Probably those weird key questions they send before letting you actually talk to an actual person. A close second would be, how low was I willing to go on my per hour rate? Out of that one, pretty quick. None of those are good signs. Story 46. Last job I had was full of rough type of dudes interviewer. You smoke? Me. No, interviewer. Well, I do, and I'm going to smoke. We proceed to talk about what I'm familiar with and tells me about crap. They guys try to pull over the new guy. It was a building with no walls, so winters are brutal, found a better job 6 months later. But the people there were interesting to talk with. Story 47. Not the weirdest question, but weirdest experience was when a startup company wanted to hire me to be their sales manager. Owner of the company tells me over the phone he doesn't like conventional interviews and asks me to meet him downtown so we can walk and talk. During lunch, after walking and talking for a bit, he starts blatantly hitting on our waitress, and you can see she's visibly uncomfortable. After she leaves, he looks me dead in the eyes and says, "You got a girlfriend or wife?" Tell him yes. He then says, "If you ever duck with me, I'll put the moves on your girl like I did with her, and I'll steal your girl just to hurt you back. Don't make me do that, man. I like you." He then proceeded to have a crocodile tear come out and repeated himself, "Do make me do that, man." Needless to say, I got the job, but declined. Story 48. Wasn't a weird question as such, but led to a weird exchange. The interviewer asked, "Why did you put down on the application form that you can't work Sunday mornings?" Me, trying to think of an answer that wasn't, "Because I sleep till noon on a Sunday," or "Because I party hard on Saturdays." Church, I then riffed for 5 minutes on stuff I knew about being a Christian. I always suspected that I got that job because the interviewers were antsy about where the conversation had gone, that they'd gone into discrimination territory. Never did work Sunday mornings. Turned up on Sunday afternoons in some right-minging states, having been out until it was time to go to work. Always imagined my boss, one of the interviewers, telling my coworkers through gritted teeth that I would be in after church. Story 49. Wasn't a question, but they handed me a large stack of red Solo cups and asked me to build the highest tower I could. It was a job that had a fair number of reports, one of which was in the interview, so I gave them the stack to complete while we moved on with the interview. Neither side was impressed. Story 50. Back before I got kids, I used to live an active life. Scuba diving, parachuting, competitive shooting, paintball, and a crapload of other fun stuff. I was asked, "I am sorry, I just have to ask. You have done a lot of crap through the years. You do not have to reply, but I'm just really curious. Do you have any injuries that will prevent you from crawling around inside a cargo compartment? It is okay if you do not want to reply. I'm really not allowed to ask, but just curious." I had to laugh and said, "Actually, to my knowledge, I am okay. A few blue and green spots here and there, but no broken bones or anything. Beats me why." Got the job, and that is still true about 20 plus years later. Added paragliding and downhill to the list. Story 51. Do you have issues with women? What? No? That was for programming job. I still don't know what they meant exactly. Did get the job, but left the company. Soon as I found the coworkers and their whole process to be kind of weird, which is especially strange as it was one of the bigger companies here with a good reputation. Story 52. I finally got an interview for a position at a prestigious law firm. I was determined to make a good impression and land this job. The interview started off smoothly, with the usual questions about my qualifications and experience. I was feeling pretty confident until the interviewer asked, "What is the weirdest thing you've ever done to impress someone?" I thought to myself, is this some kind of trick question? And the first thing what came to mind was, well, there was this one time in college where I dressed up as a giant hot dog and ran around campus handing out free sausages to promote a food truck, I said, cringing at my own answer. To my surprise, the interviewer burst out laughing and said, "That's hilarious. I hired a guy last year who did the same thing dressed as a slice of pizza. I ended up getting the job." Story 53. I had one interview where the only questions I got asked were, "What's your favorite movie? Have you ever seen Jaws? Do you know how to paint, cut grass, make sandwiches?" Somehow I got the job, but got laid off a month later. Bit of a blessing in disguise. The job sucked, and I found a better one anyway. Story 54. Interviewing for a software tester position with a rideshare company affiliated with an auto manufacturer. Went through a pretty standard interview and got to the question section. Asked a relatively standard question about how their business model worked. And the response was, "Why do you want to know this?" I asked the question partially because as a person I need to understand how things are supposed to work, so I can make sure they do what they're supposed to, and also because I wasn't quite sure how they were supposed to be making any money from what their business model appeared to be at the time. I didn't get the job and was rather unsurprised when they went out of business only about a year later. Story 55. I was once interviewed for a manager job in my own company when one of the 3 panelists, who was very antagonistic from the start, suddenly asked me, how many windows were there in New York City? Just when I was about to answer, he immediately changed the question to, how far away is the sun? I knew the answer because I was educated in Cornell, and when I started talking about how far away the sun is and how big it is, he immediately yelled, "Shut up about the sun! Shut up about the sun!" I was shocked, and the rest of the interview didn't go well either, but I landed the job anyway. Story 56. In a zombie invasion, what is something about you that would make people want you on their team? I used the word sneaky in my answer because my brain couldn't come up with stealthy. I did not get the job. Story 57. How did Chris Angel do this? My interview ended with the interviewer saying, if you can answer this last question correctly, the job is yours. He proceeded to pull out his phone and show me a video of Chris Angel levitating go over the Luxor Hotel. Interviewer. How did Chris Angel do this? Me. If I had to guess, it's probably wires from a helicopter. Interviewer. Unfortunately, I feel like it was done differently, so I can't offer you this job. Turns out, he didn't know how the trick was done, wouldn't tell me how he thought the trick was done, and wasn't joking about that being the reason for not getting the job. Story 58. I actually had an interview many years ago and everything seemed to be reasonably well. I didn't need the job, but I was there to see what came of it. Everything was pretty normal till the end, and I was asked that stupid question. If you could be any animal, what would it be and why? This has been the only time I broke in an interview. I just didn't care at all at that point. I asked what the duck that has to do with this job, or my qualifications to do this job. Wait, I don't care. I withdraw my interest in this position. I grabbed my resume and walked the duck out. Story 59. They handed me a piece of paper with 6 numbers on it and said, you have 60 seconds to figure out the pattern. Go! After 60 seconds of puzzling out any kind of pattern, I concluded that there wasn't one and said, I think you just handed me 6 unrelated numbers and wanted to see if I'd give you some kind of bullcrap answer. Apparently I was right, and very few of their prospective candidates are brave enough to say it. Most give some kind of bullcrap answer. Got the job, didn't enjoy the job very much. Turns out they messed with their employees in other ways that weren't so mundane. What are some red flags in a job interview? Story 1. When the pay that is advertised is suddenly different in the interview. This blew up. Couple of things. 1. Was not aware this was so common. All your stories are really saddening. There were a few folks who were offered more than advertised. That's so great. 2. I did end up taking the job. I know. Dignity. The job is part-time in the day and works with my evening gig. I'm okay with it. 3. I am Kansan, but identify as Canadian curious. Story 2. Years ago, I applied for a job at Taco Bell. The manager set up a day and time for me, and we sat down in the dining room, and he talked about his life for well over an hour. His ex-wives, his old band, the thrills of hitchhiking. Then he shook my hand and said, whenever we get an opening, I'll keep you in mind. I got suckered into listening to a life story for no job. Story 3. Often if they promise quick promotions, you'll be a senior manager in 6 months, you should leave. The reason for the quick promotions is that the job sucks and has a high turnover. I get it, this doesn't hold true 100% of the time, but just like the white, windowless vans offering free candy, the ones you can trust are the exception. Story 4. We work hard and we play hard, or any variation of that. I learned that lesson. To me, it meant you're going to work a lot of 60-hour weeks with no or comp time. You might be working random nights and or weekends. We might deny a vacation request that you put in nearly 6 months in advance, but once in a while, we'll take all of you guys to the Mexican restaurant down the street and pay for lunch. Story 5. When they hire everyone in the group interview, even the idiots, signifies a high turnover of employees, and if you're a casual, they'll get rid of you once the busy season is over. Story 6. When they ask you if you have any questions for them, and you ask, what is your favorite thing about your job working for this company? And they reply, well, I'm not the one being interviewed, proceeds to answer, and then says, was that good enough for you? Immediately made me realize that even if I did get a job offer, I did not want to work for someone like that. Story 7. They started asking me if I was married, if my significant other worked full-time, and if we were ever planning to have kids. I'm a gal. I was probably 25 or 26 at the time. Story 8. When you ask, what do you like about working at company? And they avoid the question or give answers like, well, this is a really great city to live in. If they can't tell you what they like about the work culture or what they like about the job, then chances are it's not a great place to work. Story 9. If they don't answer you directly as to why the person in the position before you left. If they allow phone calls to them during the interview, or if people just walk into the office and interrupt. If you tour the office with a supervisor, and people all of the sudden look fearful or pretend to suddenly be busy. If you are interrogated instead of interviewed, you should have a conversation with your interviewer, not just rattle of questions. If they have absolutely no original questions, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your biggest strength, weakness? Why do you want to work here, etc.? Story 10. The interviewer is very late. I'm in HR at a nursing home. My director of nursing sometimes leaves people waiting for 30-45 minutes, then can't understand why they don't accept the offer. She feels like HR is not qualified to interview nurses, although my HR director has been doing this for 30 years. So we are forced to make people wait. Story 11. I would say a place that promotes themselves as a family. They'll end up attempting to use it against you in the future, and let's be honest, it is business, not personal. Story 12. Do you mean to watch out for in the interviewer or interviewee? For the interviewer, getting agitated with you for asking fairly basic questions like what the culture's like, what they like about the place, what makes someone successful in the role. It indicates that they either can't honestly answer those questions without getting negative, or that they won't view you as a team member for the interviewee. Cockiness or overestimation of how important your skills are. I used to hire tech in Seattle. People right out of college would act like the hottest crap for knowing how to code. Entry-level coders are a dime a dozen in Seattle. Still worth hiring, but not with that attitude. I had a guy who hadn't had a coding job before give me a number for desired salary that literally made me laugh out loud. Covered the phone to do it. Asked how he came to that number. It's what his cousin, a 5-year programmer at Google, was making. This job was for a local education company. You know nothing about the value of your skills. If you would pay a year 1 programmer at a local company as a 5-year programmer at Freaks My Google story. 13. When they make you wait for an hour after the scheduled interview time before they talk with you. When they make you wait in the employee's break room where paint is peeling off the walls, the table and chairs are beat to crap, and there's a hole in one wall. When they tell you seem to be a good candidate to be hired, but oh wait, you need to take a computer personality test. Now sorry. You did great up until you failed the test. Hope you enjoyed that waste of 2+ hours. Duck in Kmart. Story 14. As an interviewer. For me, a big red flag is not being able to have a somewhat normal conversation with someone. I understand that it's a higher pressure situation than everyday life, but if I'm going to work with you, I want to know that you're not totally socially inept, as teamwork is a big requisite. Otherwise, not having the technical chops, having 1 year of experience, and not being able to answer most of the easier stuff. As an interviewee, feeling like honest questions can't be asked or get dodged. What's the day-to-day like? What's realistic in terms of work-life balance? Benefits, salary, it's on story 15. We're like family here is something often said by bosses who must have grown up with crafty families because they basically mean, I'm going to say and do unprofessional crap and get personally upset if you let me down. No thanks. I'd prefer a simple exchange of my time and labor for monetary compensation and benefits without any feeling. My actual parents and I are on great terms. Story 16. Once I had an interview where they asked me why there was a gap year since my last job, and I told them I had a child and wanted to take some time with him before getting back to work. The interviewer kept saying, but I don't understand this year off and you can't explain it. I will wait till you can justify that year off. I tried to explain again, and when she said that again and said I should not lie, I said, okay, I think we're done. I have no desire to work with you, and left while she was getting started on a lecture about how I shouldn't lie because interviewers can see right through me. I still don't understand why she thought it was a lie. I mean, I had the year-old kid to prove it. Story 17. If it sounds like the interviewer knows little about the specifics of the skills you are bringing, expect them to never actually understand it. This is probably going to be typical of the company, and you will never be respected. I was a photographer for a used car company. I frequently had to explain that I couldn't photograph faster without losing quality, got very little assistance, and had to wander the lots trying to find cars by myself, wasting more of the time they were complaining about. Got the nickname of Kubrick, and eventually got my position eliminated when they decided to just have the dealers take photos on their cell phone. Story 18. If the interviewer isn't prepared and/or is late 10+ minutes. I've gone to an interview where the two interviewers sat there asking each other, what questions are we asking? What position is this for? Right in front of me. If I spent the last 3 to 5 days preparing for this interview in my spare time, I'm a software dev, so all my interviews are technical and I like to be over-prepared, then I expect my interviewer to know what's going on, be prepared, and somewhat on time. Story 19. I had an engineering internship job interview for a huge global mega corporation whose name I will not name. In the interview, basically, I was yelled and was all but called stupid. The interviewer was extremely aggressive and took jabs at all of my answers. I got the job, which involved signing a contract that involved me getting training and working for a minimum amount of time after graduation. The company in exchange would pay for your tuition, and if you quit until your contract is up or you got fired, you'd have to pay the tuition back. Long story short, Things slowly but surely went downhill as I started. Me and a lot of people hired alongside me quit just before graduation. Turns out nothing is free. And if you sign a contract where you could potentially owe money to your employer will take advantage of that. All things considered, that interview where treated like crap was a major red flag I ignored. Story 20. Setting. Back in the 1990s, when harassment was more often than today considered a bogus, trumped-up excuse to fire someone. Me, female, the interviewer. So, why did you leave your last job? Him, the candidate. Well, I did not do this, and I am fighting it, but technically I got fired for harassment. Me, thinking with my 1990s head, oh, I can keep an open mind on that. Me, several questions later. So, what appeals to you about this job? Him. From the first moment I talked to you on the phone, I just fell in love with the sound of your voice. Me. Gag. Story 21. When the boss gets bent out of shape because you ask about unpaid vacation time before you're hired. Before I was hired, I let the boss know that I would need time off for my honeymoon in 6 months, and that if it was a problem, then I understood why I would not be hired. However, I was hired. I went above and beyond my job description daily, consequently saving this guy and his business a lot of money, including a $30K machine that the business needs to do what it does. I did plumbing, I fixed pneumatic equipment, I picked up dead mice and literal crap, even went as far as building him a client list with over 750 potential clients. That didn't seem to matter. A week before my honeymoon, the machine went tits up and the boss had to spend $2,200 on new parts. No worries, I think I can handle it, is what I say. It would have cost him double the cost of the parts to have someone come service the machine because there are no techs in America. So I fixed the machine a few days before I get married and leave for my honeymoon, and even am able to repair one of the pieces and instantly save him $900. Then this ducking guy sends my last check and a letter stating, my services are no longer needed in the mail halfway through my honeymoon, and then wouldn't return my calls. Worthless piece of crap. In short, if a potential employer is butthurt about you taking unpaid time off for an important engagement like your own wedding and honeymoon, during the slow season no less, turn and walk away from that dumpster fire before the people there turn you into the same kind of human trash that they are. Story 22. So I had interviewed for a position for a call center and got the job. What I didn't realize was if you showed up to the interview and spoke in at least partial sentences, you were going to get hired. So young, so naive. Anyway, a family emergency made me miss the first day, so I called to see if they could reschedule. I must have sounded nervous because the receptionist, in his bored voice, just said, they'll hire you for something. Come in a week. So not exactly the interview part, but part of the hiring process. If they're snatching up bodies, it means they're going through them and quickly. Story 23, two very important ones. If your interview is during normal working hours, I have been to some after normal hours, look around the parking lot. If you see a bunch of beaters and a few nice cars, chances are the workers are paid junk, while executives reap the benefits of your hard work. Another big one, and some background. I'm a welder now in my permanent home in aviation, but when I was going to shops, I always wanted to see the equipment in my potential working area. Whoever would show me around was someone of importance there. I would look and see how the workers would act with his/her presence. If the workers seem hostile or guy try and hide, chances are the management is horrible and will work you ragged. Story 24. As a tech person, if it's a startup usually, was interviewing with a tech startup trying to get into the fashion world, and the people behind the startup flat out knew nothing about the industry or how to even enter it. I walked out of that one. The company never even got off the ground, let alone have the opportunity to fail. Story 25. Illegal questions should always be a red flag. It's amazing how many people don't know what questions in an interview or application are illegal to ask. Not only do these questions hurt their chances of being hired, but they also might point to the employer being unfair, discriminatory. Try to be aware of some tactics employers use before going in for an interview or applying for a job. Story 26. Anything that requires you to buy a kit to get started, it's a bunch of bullcrap and you need to get up and walk out. You aren't getting in on the ground floor of any hidden gems of opportunity. You're about to fall into a goddamn high-pressured sales funnel. Also, I've learned to be extremely leery of companies that spend a lot of time talking about how much money their industry has made. Story 27. When they ask really personal, and in many cases unlawful questions like, are you a Christian? Or are you planning on having more kids soon? Or when they act inexplicably confrontational. I once had an interviewer ask me, what nationality are you anyway? I mentioned that I wrote the Spanish language bankruptcy and personal injury pages for my law firm, and he said he found this hard to believe because I look Italian? He actually said that. Hard pass on that job. Story 28. A lot of the red flags I've seen came in the form of answers to questions I'd asked. It's very important to make sure you actually want to work there in an interview, as well as making them want to hire you. Code. What's your management style? Had an interviewer tell me that I could set up my job however I wanted. Essentially, he was going to be traveling a lot and I wouldn't have access to a supervisor most of the time. Nope. Okay. How do you measure employee performance in this role? If they don't give you a clear, measurable answer, they're setting you up for failure. You deserve to know where the goalposts are for this job and how to reach them. And if they're vague or just not there, how will you meet them? Why is this position open? Did the previous person have a nervous breakdown and run for the hills? The interviewer probably won't tell you that up front, but watch for vague or evasive answers that indicate the previous employee left under bad circumstances. If they just moved to another town or got promoted, cool. If they left because they couldn't handle the demands of the job, ask follow-up questions about what those demands were. Were they unwilling to put in tons of unpaid OT? Did they get canned for needing to leave work to pick their kids up from school? Look for clues as politely as you can, while focusing on the job requirement. What's the advancement track look like from this position? If it's a dead end, you need to know so you can make an informed career decision. What professional development opportunities do you offer employees? Again, if this is a dead-end job and they don't intend to develop your skills, you need to know that. Story 29. When they openly talk about how you're replacing the last employee they fired. My boss turned out to be legitimately mentally unstable. I quit before she fired me too. Insane. Story 30. Now, if you're at McDonald's or a minimum wage job, this doesn't apply. The biggest red flag is if the interviewer seems very excited or eager to hire you within 10 minutes of your first meeting. These are generally terrible jobs. It means that they have a lot of turnover and need anybody to fill in fast. I got hired once about 10 minutes into an interview. When I came back a few days later for my first day, I found out how horrible the job was and made it to 5 o'clock, then left and never went back. Story 31. I'm actually looking out for a job, and the other day, the HR asked why I wanted to leave my current job. I said I was done with 12-hour shifts and being forced to work an extra day on a weekend on a small incentive. He said, "That's how outsourcing works, my friend." I politely refused. Story 32. My current job. I met the guy for my first interview at a local restaurant for breakfast. We ordered and sat around for 1.5 hours or so. Things went well. He grabs the check and no wallet. At this point, I'm thinking the position was crap and the guy just took me for a $30 breakfast. I paid. The guy apologized profusely. We left. The next day, a FedEx arrives with $30 and an apology. I took the job. The guy, although no longer my manager, was awesome. On that same date each year, he still sends me a FedEx with 30 years of service and a thank you note. He found out I donated the money each year to a charity, so he started matching it each year as well out of his pocket. 17th anniversary coming up, so I should be getting a $500 check next month. What's the moral of that story? I'm not really sure, other than maybe not all red flags are what they seem. Story 33. Not being asked situational questions instead of stupid crap like, what would you say is your biggest weakness? Either they want to know you and how you have increased your value as an asset in your particular industry, or they want to know if you wiki. How'd the interview process? Story 34. Offering low pay and promising to increase it as you get more experienced, but refusing to put that on paper. Why am I getting downvoted? Every hospitality job I've ever had that included this empty promise in the interview ended up being a super shady business. It happened. Story 35. Person interviewing you comes in late. Person interviewing you doesn't show up at all. Person interviewing you looks disheveled and smells of alcohol. They forgot they even scheduled an interview with you. They start interviewing you for a completely different role than what you applied for. The furniture and computer equipment is very outdated and falling apart. Large group of people all interviewing for the same job. Hallmark of multi-level marketing scheme. Story 36. When one of the bosses asks if you can take a joke, because they joke around a lot, but it's actually them just insulting you and pointing out multiple possible insecurities. Also managers who have no idea what it is exactly that you do, but expect you to work as quickly as possible. I am a graphic designer, and I was expected to finish the intricate from scratch designs in 30 mins or less. Story 37. When they spend a lot of time talking about how great they are and how it's all big happy families. When they talk extensively about how everyone is equal and they love all their employees and everything is 100% about the family and so on. At some point, they're talking about it so much, you should wonder who they're trying to convince. It means they want to treat their family like absolute crap and cry poor when an employee objects to being treated like garbage because, happy families. But you can guarantee their employees have to be 100% nice and loyal all the time, regardless of the abuse they cop daily. Story 38. I had an interview once for the big blue and yellow box furniture store. I was really excited about it. Who doesn't love that store? When I got there, it was a group interview type of situation, not what I was expecting. I had a doctor's appointment in a couple hours too, and it seemed like this might take a couple hours at least. I stood up and walked up to the interviewer to privately and quietly ask how long it would take. He said loudly, "Why? Do you have somewhere more important to be?" I looked right at him and smiled and said, "You know what? I don't want to work for someone who treats employees this way. Thank you for the opportunity." And I left the room. I wanted so bad to work there and was so excited about the interview, but that just rubbed me the wrong way. Story 39. Not an interview, but when getting an offer. 1. HR says they're going to offer you the position, but have to get management approval first. 2. That approval takes 3 business days. This is 2 weeks after the interview. 3. HR says over the phone, before approval, "The offer, normally we don't do this, but we're going to give you 3 weeks of vacation. Is that okay?" And when you reply yes, they take that as verbally accepting the job offer. That made rejecting the offer super awkward. What are some red flags you steer clear of in job descriptions that immediately prevent you from applying? Story 1. Any of the following. Go above and beyond self-starter. Startup, wear many hats. Absolute rock star. Go-getter with big goals, want to be part of something big. Duck your startup. I'm not going to be your whole marketing department and get paid like an intern. Story 2. Anything asking for any kind of video, either explaining everything that you can easily find on my resume or explaining why I would be a good fit for the job. That can all be handled during the interview process. It's a waste of time. Story 3. Anytime they refer to working there as being part of a family or family culture, it's bullcrap that usually means we expect you to work long hours, unpaid overtime, and when sick, etc. Because it's what a family is like. Story 4. Competitive pay, but they won't tell you what it is, boasting about benefits that aren't really benefits. Free on-site parking or free coffee and kitchen. They specifically state that they're looking for someone with no ego, or someone that can deal with working in a fast-paced environment, or someone that can deal with big personalities. Job duties seems to be 2 to 3 job titles in one, but they lowball on salary. Go to click apply and Workday pops up. They ask you all these questions up front during the application process that can be easily answered during the interview or looking at your resume. Why do you want to work here? What skills would you bring to this role? Why do you think we should hire you? But the biggest one for me of all, they make it mandatory for you to submit a cover letter. Story 5. We work hard and play hard. This one is so triggering, it makes me want to punch someone in the face when they say it. Self-starter. Mind reader, hit the ground running. No training, must have a thick skin. We will heckle and bully you and do it under the guise that we are joking around when we're really not. We are family. Dysfunctional. Run like hell. If you're feeling extra spicy and don't mind burning bridges, ask them point blank, who in your family would you lay off first? Forced fun. It better be during work hours. If it's not, I better get paid for it, and if it's more than 40 hours, I better get paid overtime, pay for it. I will disclose that I have a second job. If I get an attitude for this, it means they're control freaks. No, thank you. Always ask where the person who used to be in the role is now. Pay special attention if they badmouth that person. We are always told to never badmouth a former employer. The same goes for an employer badmouthing former employees. It goes both ways. Ask the manager about a time when they've succeeded. If they don't mention their team and only themselves, run, don't walk. Pay attention to body language and them not making eye contact with you. It means they're a bunch of liars. If the job posting offers direct deposit as a benefit, direct deposit is not a benefit. It's common ducking sense. If there's a personality test, I will rescind my application. Use the bathroom while you are there interviewing. If the bathroom is disgusting, then it's a sign that the company is also disgusting. Story 6. Paced environment. Usually means the senior management are completely incompetent and keep changing their minds about important business decisions. Story 7. 0 words about benefits, pay, holidays, etc. If the description is all about what they want and not about what they can offer to an employee, I assume that's the level of interest I can expect from them in compensating me for my work. And benefits, which are actually just the job. Working with fantastic teams no, that's a description, not a benefit. Keeping your laptop for personal use after 4 years of continued use is a benefit. Having a laptop to work on isn't a benefit. It's a basic. Story 8. Work hard, play hard. You'll be doing 14 hours, then doing shots with your colleagues afterwards to get over the miserableness of it all, and you'll inevitably end up just moaning about your terrible job, which has now become your entire life. Story 9. Will you go the extra mile for your customers? Do you put your team first? Type of nonsense. That translated is, you will have no life, be underpaid, and have your soul crushed before we fire you? Story 10. Need someone who can hit the ground running and is a fast learner. Translation. We won't train you, but we will blame you. Any mention of politics. Translation: we're loud, right-wing nut jobs. We work hard and play hard. Translation: we'll overwork and underpay you. There's a ton more I just can't think of right now. Story 11. As someone who posts jobs and does write some variation of other duties as assigned, I think it's impractical to be able to list out every single job responsibility in a job posting. Other duties, at least from my perspective, helps to do a couple of things. One, preventing process disruptions. Sometimes people get to, it wasn't in the job description, and cause process disruptions. For example, bringing on a digital marketing copywriter, we would state that they're expected to write copy, but not detail that they're expected to submit that copy to someone for approval, or post it to our blog. We actually had someone try to argue that submitting wasn't in the job description. 2. Allow room for growth. I try to provide some context around other duties, like informing potential applicants that our business is an opportunity to learn new skills that aren't strictly a part of the job, but that in order to justify investing in that education, you may need to use those skills in your role from time to time. I do want to be careful that I don't over or under promise. For example, going back to our digital marketing copywriter, other duties might include some light web coding, HTML or CSS, which would certainly be beneficial for a copywriter to know. Story 12. Wide salary ranges usually indicate a commission job. For example, no salaried job will have a job description with a salary range from 40K to 120K. Many places that brag about flexible scheduling work with third-party vendors to staff their jobs. You want to avoid these in general because the odds of landing full-time employment are low. The company pays to maintain a relationship with the staffing company, and they usually purchase contracts for a set period of time. It would cost more money to onboard a permanent employee, provide him a salary, insurance, and other benefits than it would to keep this contract and work with new employees every few months. Job descriptions that prefer you have extensive experience probably aren't interested in training you, but this can be found out in the interview process. Some people just suck at writing job descriptions and don't understand the weight of these words. 1099 work is not desirable unless you enjoy paying out the ass in taxes. Most job listings will specify if the position is 1099. Not all, so be sure to confirm. Strongly preferred usually means we'll kick out your application without this. Some of my points didn't answer your question, but are still useful. Source. I worked in recruiting, hiring, and employee engagement for 4 torturous years. Story 13. Might be controversial, but if it says upbeat, energetic team player with a positive attitude or any variation of it, this means they want someone who is robotic and always smiling and never faltering, will tolerate being a doormat to everyone and won't ever bring up concerns or issues within the company, and that the company focuses more on ass-kissing than the employee properly doing their jobs. Also, flexible schedule, because it's code for, we'll never give you days off you requested and you'll never be able to properly schedule your free time. It also means get ducked if you're on your day off and don't want to cover a shift they call you in for. Above and beyond, 7 people's jobs for one salary and work off the clock. Easily adapt to change and handle emergencies calmly. Unless we're talking a first responder or medical job, this means the work culture is toxic and they put unnecessary pressure on employees. Submit your CV and resume the CV. They don't care what your qualifications actually are because those are on your resume. They want to see how well you bed and if it gets them tingly in their swimsuit area, just right. Any job that says entry level but requires a degree. Story 14. Unrealistic expectations or requirements. If the job description lists unrealistic expectations or requirements, such as expecting a significant amount of experience or education for an entry-level position, I may be hesitant to apply. This may indicate that the employer is not realistic about the job or the market and may be difficult to work with. Vague or unclear job responsibilities. If the job description is vague or unclear about the responsibilities and duties of the job, I may be hesitant to apply. This may indicate that the employer is not sure what they are looking for or that the job may not be well-defined or structured. Low salary or benefits. If the job description lists a low salary or benefits package, I may be hesitant to apply. This may indicate that the employer is not willing to invest in their employees and may not provide a supportive or rewarding work environment. Negative or unprofessional language. If the job description uses negative or unprofessional language, such as insulting or discriminatory comments, I may be hesitant to apply. This may indicate that the employer has a toxic or unprofessional culture and may not be a good fit for me. Story 15. Found on pace work environment. A teacher told me that every work environment is gas-paced, and if they have to say it, they a holes. Because you're a woman. I was once in an interview for a job, and I was nervous, and there were many red flags waving beforehand, but I was super new. The interviewer then asked if I was overly sensitive, I naively thought it was about dealing with customers. But no, he actually said out loud, because you're a woman, and people on site like to josh each other or being stern and direct. We aren't going to police ourselves to blah blah blah. Still salty. Other gems from the interview. Laughing at me when I asked about health insurance, telling me using GFCIS on circuits without grounds wasn't a code. Ignoring me as I handed over my resume thinking my name was Alexander, because he decided to pick up a random resume from his desk instead of my hand, telling me they were a small startup business in response to any question about money pay, was dependent on the job, so no hourly wage really. I didn't get the job though. Really did not want it though. Story 16. On-call positions. Life is too damn short. Credit checks, substances tests, invasion of privacy much. Hubris about their company. You make software to schedule yoga classes. It's not world-changing, sit the duck down. Negative statements like, lazy people should not apply, or no crybaby. Does this reverse psychology bullcrap really work? Any references about family or family culture, screams of a cult? Story 17, competitive salary, but they don't post what it actually is, self-starter, which means ambiguous expectations, willing to go the extra mile, which means doing more work than you're compensated for, working outside of scheduled hours, and or being expected to do work that is not a part of your job description. Bonus points for exciting new opportunity or newly formed position, which means there are definitely unmet needs in the organization, but since it's new and a response to stress, no one knows what the job duties actually are or what the expectations of the new role are. Worked to enough startups over the years to know that new positions are almost always dumpster fires of unclear expectations and evolving responsibilities. Maybe okay for some, but I avoid newly established roles because it's unlikely everyone is in agreement on how the role should be filled. Story 18. Any political statements or soapbox, preachy crap that lets you know you'll be working for an arrogant hole who thinks you should worship the ground they walk on because they let you work for them. Story 19. Any offer that is just a collection of buzzwords. If I'm not able to tell what I'll be doing for what company and what the salary is right from the first message, it's a no. I especially hate the type of messages that are just, I have the best ever offer for you. No, you don't. No decent company has ever reached out to me with such a message. Every large and decent company always leads with their name, the role, and ideally some salary. Every best offer anybody ever had for me was either some sort of we're a tight family crap or something questionable, like some hyped up crypto whatever or just sports betting. Never has such a message resulted in anything worthwhile for me, so I just don't care anymore. Also, if the offer in general is just overflowing with buzzwords, even if it states the salary, etc., it just doesn't feel right for me. Story 20. In no particular order, anything that implies stock, shares, or options are a required part of the package. It's something I'm willing to consider, but in my experience, an enforced engagement in that tends to be the company owner trying to get away with paying under the market rate. Any BS about hardcore, go hard or go home, bring your A-game stuff. A professional outfit explains the work, waving. Lack of detail is a no-no. Cutting-edge technologies isn't a tech stack. Competitive is not a number. Attempts to redefine the term remote doesn't mean half my week in the office or 1 week out of 3 having to commute. I'm totally happy with hybrid working, but bullcrap around this area tends to imply the company is winging it. Story 21. The word kindly anywhere, in any wording in the job offer, interview, or anything else related to it. I have been contacted 30 times in the last 2 days. Once I updated my resume on CareerBuilder, I'll start with kindly or mention that word somewhere. Total scams, Skype interview. No one uses Skype anymore. That or they say that I am perfect for a job that is 1,700 miles away, and they keep saying it is not that far. A 23-hour commute each way is ducking far, bro. Then it is X pay for a 1099 and 5 or 10 bucks less for a $4. Huge red flags. Story 22. Self-starter. We won't train you. Can hit the ground running. We expect you to know how we do things without any training, and you better be good at it. Good work-life balance. We like to say that, but we don't mean it. We still expect you to devote your life to the company. Story 23. Is able to multitask effectively. We only hire high-speed, low-drag developers. If you need your mommy to come in and help you keep organized, the elementary school is across the street and you're in the wrong place. One of my old PHP jobs got bought out, and the new management style was basically to dump several unrelated and massive tickets on each of the devs, and then publicly dress them down for not making massive strides in completion on all of them at the next stand-up. I noped out of there, and the above was taken from a job posting they made for my old position. Story 24. 1. If a job description of a non-junior position is very brief, it could indicate the hiring manager has no idea about the job requirements, or the job requirements will be very flexible. You will be told to do whatever the manager wants you to do. 2. The reporting line indicates conflicts of interest. Internal auditor reports to head of accounting. Very fishy. 3. The position title, salary level, and job responsibilities are not aligned. Big title and junior skill requirements, but with big responsibilities and higher than normal salary. It could indicate the position expects you do nothing but take blame. The big title and salary are to make sure you cannot easily find a new job and move on. Story 25. Any job position that starts with junior. Usually, it's used to describe entry job levels, which is totally fine. However, I see too many companies in my area labeling junior to actual senior roles just to try to pay less for the same duties. It's a junior role, but we require 3 years of experience. Okay, companies that classify their job postings as remote, but in the job description, they state that you need to come 2-3 times by week to the office. There is remote and there is hybrid. Learn the difference. If you aren't honest about this stuff right out of the start, why should I expect better while working there? Story 26. Good stuff here. But for consulting jobs, I've seen a bunch of weird creep for what an analyst actually does. Left a number of Zoom phone interviews early after asking if this was a cold calling job. No, they're warm leads. And pay is commission-based too? Click. So, analyst in the job title without having a narrow focus for specifically data crunching/SOPs. Also, jobs with really specific requirements for weird Carpo software experience. That usually means the tech debt is an absolute crap show. I'm not going to waste my time learning Lotus Domino. Story 27. I worked in communications in the tech and higher ed sectors. Culture fit. So, this is high school, but you're being paid for it. Asking for work samples outside of what is available in my portfolio. Code for free labor. That is a big fat no. Looking for disruptor. We will steal your ideas, then fire you for not being a good culture fit, fast-paced environment. So, you suck at planning and prioritizing. Pass. Rockstar, ninja, char. We have no clue what this job is, but we are expecting this person to solve all the things. Story 28. I've been caught out twice getting a job where it turned out I was just covering someone's senior while they went away on a long overdue holiday. The training I got was poor. I'm experienced enough, but not superhuman, to squeak through in those circumstances. I spent the next 3 weeks working extra hard, trying to SC together a hot mess in time for their return. Now, in any job interview, I never forget to ask that precious question. Is this to cover staff holidays or time off? Then effing forget it. In story 29. Any job description that says employees must be agile, flexible, and comfortable with ambiguity, open to overtime, willing to wear multiple hats, willing to go extra mile, I won't apply. Employer is like a family, has fast-paced environment. I won't apply. No salary range is equals no application. Any job posted for more than 3 weeks or any job that is frequently reposted, I won't apply. Any mention of rock stars, ninjas, etc. is a no-go. Any mention of written tests or homework is a no-go. Story 30. Looking for an all-star. You'll be hired for multiple job positions, but be one person. We're a family here. Equals toxic culture environment salary commiserates with experience. We will lowball you no matter what and gaslight any relevant experience. Fun, fast-paced environment. You will be very depressed and burned out. Growth opportunities, as no manager or supervisor is going to let you grow to their position or above. Better have a relative in upper management here. Tuition reimbursement, if the budget allows for it, and it almost never does. Story 31. When they want 3+ years of experience for an entry-level position. Not stating what the pay rate is, a long paragraph about the company, but no actual job description. We're like a family. They will expect you to commit your whole life to the job. You also will be expected to work off the clock, answer work phone calls when you're at home, and drop everything if they try to call you in on a day you're not scheduled. If you don't, you get in trouble. Story 32. 1. If they have a telegraph phone number that I have to call. 2. If they have a contact number that has the country code, I think they're gathering information to spam me. 3. After I look up the company and find that it's an IT staffing or IT consulting company. I see a lot of these companies that just post jobs on boards like Indeed, gather hundreds of resumes, take the job down, and repost them 3 to 4 months later. Story 33. Cover letter required. Mind you, I have 2-3 already outlined, and all I got to do is change the date and job title. But I seriously hate it. I always ask, is there anything in my cover letter that stuck out to you? And then I say, anything on my resume you'd like me to clear up? But but half the time, they don't even look at my cover letter story 34. I will never again do a recorded video of answering questions. I can do interviews on Zoom, Teams, or other live video conferences, or I can go to the company's office for in-person interview if it is nearby. But if the interview is not live, then no. I need the interview to be a dynamic conversation, an opportunity to show my qualities, and build rapport with my potential managers. I am not an on-screen actor, and I am horrible at giving a monologue. Story 35. I was looking for a job as a receptionist at a dentistry office. The job description was, "We work our tails off for our very high-end patients. You will want to work here because Dr. X is so incredibly hardworking, one of the best dentists in the state. And did we mention how incredibly good-looking he is? He is really handsome." I Googled him. He was not good-looking at all.